charger. You're so full of shit. You know that? You're so full of shit. All these gadgets. Oh, so if you get me like this, then you get the G-Jam, right? Yeah. Good. What's this, Del? What's this? No. How can you work with that? Does that make new music? How?
The fireplace.
Who did the fireplace? Where did that come from? Really? So that was your idea as a background?
So John, you've been in the business since the 80s and you've seen it all. You've seen move from vinyl to CDs, cassettes, digital. Mm-hmm. But what has remained is that music moves when people cares, right?
Correct.
And a part of your work has been to make concept albums. You did Bobby Digital by RZA. Could you tell me a little bit about that and making that album?
Well, RZA obviously was the brain behind the Wu-Tang Clan. During that period, they were signed to Loud Records. I had a good relationship with Prince Paul, who was part of De La Soul, and he brought to me the Gravediggers record, which was a record that used parables and metaphors to purvey modern day horrors of being in the inner cities in America, being black in the inner cities in America. And it was a very unique way of portraying some of those plights, those challenges. So we released the first Gravediggers record, and during that period I met the RZA. We got on really well creatively. I mean, the guy has got so many ideas, from film to business to creative. So we really got on well. So when he announced he wanted to do a solo album, all the labels got really excited, and of course his Wu-Tang label, the Loud Records, really wanted to sign him, as did everyone else on the planet. But from a creative standpoint and what we'd done on the first two Gravediggers albums, he felt comfortable with G Street, which was my label at the time. We, as an A&R person and obviously as the label founder, I like to sign people that had their own concepts, their own creativity. If they wanted a third ear, I would be there for them. Obviously, I'd give them input. So it's a creative collaboration, but the whole of the Bobby Digital was perceived by RZA himself. And I think the album was titled Bobby Digital, RZA as Bobby Digital. This was, it was interesting actually, because the late Bobby Digital I knew quite well. And I contacted him when we were going to name this album, and we actually made a deal with him to use the name. So that was all done up front.
That's Bobby Digital, the Jamaican producer?
Correct, yes, because his name and brand was out there. Obviously, at the same time, I was president of Island Jamaica for Chris Blackwell. So I had a keen engagement with all the Jamaican producers and so forth. In those days, we did the Luciano album, we did Beanie Man's record, Shaka Demus and Pliers. These were all being worked by the same staff I had at G Street as an independent, but under the Island umbrella. But when we got to the Bobby Digital album, that was when I was running V2 in America for Richard Branson. We'd left Island by that point because it was late 90s. RZA just laid out his concept. It was absolutely amazing. We even went as far as to find the original artists that did all the black exploitation movies from the 70s. And my designer, David Caudley at the time, from Graphic Therapy, he did all the research and they put together that incredible cover. So everything, when we went to promo it, it was like a sort of modern day James Bond, but in the context of everything that interested RZA and creatively, which was the sort of the martial arts, and all the different influences came on there.
Do you think that helped to sell the album, as in he tied it to animated stuff? The martial arts had a whole following. In the same way Marvel has a following now, people were into that.
I think that was something that was created through the Wu-Tang Clan. So that was an element that obviously came along when he did his first Bobby Digital album, yes. But there's so many more facets to it. His outspoken views on politics, his views on black power and so forth, were all very relevant, and I think is a big part of his his following right up until this day.
So do you think artists should tie their art to that kind of bigger topic, bigger pop culture issues?
If they have a voice, absolutely. Don't jump on a bandwagon, but if they feel emotionally and morally strong about a particular issue, absolutely, I totally believe in that. I don't believe in these journalists that say, oh, they should stick to music and all that shit, because activism and politics, have always shared places in outspoken people in music. It's less so now, what I find. But I find that's a lot to do with social media and, people being less, activism isn't what it used to be, put it that way. The French still know to demonstrate, but the British don't.
When you were in charge of Island as an A&R and you were running the label,
I was doing the Jamaican, all the Jamaican music, yeah.
You sold records at that time. Beenie Man's Blessed is one of his most successful albums. We pulled up the numbers recently. Mm-hmm. Even the cover for that was, kind of nice. William Richards did that. Mm-hmm. It just had an international look.
Yeah.
What was that insight in knowing that could sell? Shaka Demus and Pliers could sell. Beenie Man could sell. And hit the charts abroad. What was that?
Shaka Demus and Pliers really bust in the UK, and that's all to do with Trevor Wyatt, who was the main driving force behind the whole reggae catalogue, apart from Chris himself in the Island Records group. So Shaka Demus was a pop tunes, and they just broke one by one out there. As far as Beanie is concerned, he was one of the first artists that really got the, during the time of some of the other greats, really got accepted by from the whole sort of East Coast Brooklyn hip hop community. So if you recall, we actually had Dougie Fresh signed to G Street. I did his Play album, and on that, as guests, he was doing a lot of collabs with Beenie Man. It's all part of the same West Indian culture that grew out of Brooklyn and just spread across America.
And then you had another concept for the Jolly Boys.
You're fast forwarding a long time, but yeah, yes. Carry on.
I'm sticking with the idea of concepts.
Well, no, there was two other concepts that were really relevant.
Do share, tell me.
Well, the great producer Diplo and Switch will tell you that they were inspired to create the Major Lazer brand thing through an album that I co-produced or executive produced with Mark. One of my partners in crime, and basically it was called Two Culture Clash. It had a lot. It was putting together. I put the Jamaican vocalists together. He put the EDM and dance producers together. We released it in 2003. It did well in Europe, and it was a really incredible fusion. We shot and recorded it at G-Jam, and we had some incredible producers coming down, and you should listen to that, because that still to this day is a record that people reference in terms of when dancehall and reggae music kind of crossed into EDM, and it was used a lot across the board. So that happened just after I sold G Street. I sold G Street in 2000. Based myself in Jamaica, and I started putting some concepts together. And the other record that did really well in France was called Adelante, and that record we're going to be re-releasing because it's been unavailable for many years. That record was a concept that I had, which was to take all the Caribbean different influence of music, take various vocalists from those genres as well as put in some sort of more contemporary producers. So we had engineers such as TK Mendez and Carlos Bess, and they had worked on Wu-Tang because I was quite close with a lot of those cats from coming out of New York. And we did Adelante, so that featured Alberosi, Kimani Marley, because I exec produced the first Kimani Marley album, The Journey, in 1998 when I signed him to G Street. So we had merengue vocalists. I went to Cuba and I found a young Cuban band and I brought them to Jamaica and recorded here. A whole heap. It's a great record. I'm going to send you a copy of that. And then after that, the next concept project, I got very involved in the hotel business and sort of converting G-Jam from a home/residential recording studio to a small boutique hotel. But then when the recession hit in 2008 and everything went pear-shaped, just as good fortune would have it, luck would have it, or the stars are aligned, a guest had wanted a calypso band, and I hadn't really paid a huge amount of attention to, hands up to Mento. About as much about Mento I knew was coming out of Montego Bay and seeing a couple of guys, strumming away on a banjo, so I didn't take it that seriously. But this chap came in called Albert Minot, very slim, about 6'1", in his 70s, and he started to play his guitar and he started to play these Mentos, and Mento tunes, and I looked at Mark and I just said, who was staying with me at the time, you know what, this guy's a fucking star, whichever way you look at it. So Dizzle, by that point, had just joined us quite recently as our in-house engineer full-time at the studios. So we went in the studio and we we produced a cover of Rehab by Amy Winehouse, who incidentally had already recorded at G-Jam, so everything was kind of linked in some sort of destiny way. We recorded it, sounded absolutely incredible. It was very clear that the instrumentation on Mento and the way we were treating it could lend itself to more contemporary music. So it was as simple as me going through my iPod.
By the way, I thought Amy Winehouse recorded the song same time with the Jolly Boys. Many people
No, I didn't. No. Yeah, at that time, Dizzle, at the ripe old age of about 21, left home from his mum and moved to the rural Port Antonio and became our chief engineer at the studios. He did an incredible job at sort of realizing the concept that we had, utilizing the majority of Mento instrumentation. So I went onto my iPod, looked at all my favorite tunes, everything from the Stranglers to Happy Monday. It's right across the board. And we started a long process of recording all of these tunes in a Mento style. It was a good distraction from the recession because everyone was in trouble, hospitality and everything at that time. And at the back end of it, out came this wonderful album called Great Expectations. Rick Elgood, who's a filmmaker I've worked closely with for the last 20 years, who's now based in the UK. He shot a video, and in the video we shot it in Port Antonio, and it just clicked. We had Patrice Flynn, Errol Flynn's wife, in there as a feature. The Jolly Boys used to be the personal band to Errol Flynn and Patrice when they owned Navy Island. So everything just meshed in every way. It was very credible. I mean, the idea originally came from a project that was put together in the 90s called the Buena Vista Club, which I was absolutely obsessed with. I just loved the way these old guys from Cuba, a documentary was made, the music was impeccable, the musicianship was, flawless, and it was a huge hit around the world, and these guys toured. So when Rehab went viral, suddenly the agents started calling us up and we put the band together and we started touring. Didn't tour so much in America, but Europe just lapped them up. We did all the big festivals over there. We then lost our engineer because he went on tour with the Jolly Boys as the drummer and helped keep them all together on that front. And out of that we did a movie which is still being edited. We did a 13-part reality show which was broadcast in Jamaica. And we did an immense amount of recording. It kind of peaked when I remember clearly, it was my 50th birthday, and I threw a party in New York at the Hero Lounge at the Maritime Hotel, a beautiful venue, underground venue. And the Jolly Boys flew over. We were releasing their record, so we doubled up. They did a performance, and a group I worked with in my very early days, in my late teens, was Sade. She used to make clothes for my clothing store I had at the time when I was a designer. And she wasn't there, but her band was, Stuart Mattheman and the team. Anyway, obviously one of them shot a video of these guys, and then about 4 days later I get a phone call from William Morris, our agent, kind of puzzled, and just said, I don't know what to say, but we just had a call from Barry Marshall, one of her team, to say she wants the Jolly Boys on their European tour. So we kind of cancelled all our American commitments, and they toured with Sade for about 6 weeks around Europe in all the O2s. So everything about it was magical, and it got a bit sad towards the end because we lost Powder, and then we were in the midst of doing the getting another record ready, and we always felt that Deo was a fantastic rendition he had done live, but we'd never recorded it. So we recorded it in 2017, 18, and then sadly we lost Albert. And I don't know, I just decided for many reasons just to put it in the vault. It was an amazing video. It was an amazing rendition of it. We also brought in Nexus, who are great vocalists, just to add to that sort of cultural spice of it. But we kept it contemporary as well. And I was in New York when I got the news about Harry, who I'd met several times through Chris Blackwell. And it was quite obvious that we should release this video and this record, and we should, it should be a tribute to not only Harry but to the Jolly Boys, who offered so much to culture and to Jamaica. In fact, they were, the tourist board's ambassadors during their height and they're all in their mid to late 70s by that time. So sadly, they're not with us anymore, but we got beautiful visuals and beautiful music to share with the world.
In the video, I realized it captures the landscape of Portland. Mm-hmm. It sells Portland, really. Is that part of the aesthetics of the Jolly Boys, the Portland vibe?
Well, I make no bones. I think, Portland should be seceded from the rest of Jamaica. And I've told, actually, when I met Portia Simpson, I told her that, but she didn't really get the joke. But anyway, no, but in all seriousness, of course, Jolly Boys are everything about Portland. As I said earlier on, you've got Errol Flynn, their connection there. You've got when they were residents at the Trident in the 60s and the 70s hotel. I mean, these guys are the bastion of Mento, and they're from Portland. This is as simple as that, so it makes absolute sense that everything that we shot in these images are about that. But also, there's another reason. Do you know what that is? The other reason is, what is Deo about? What does it reference? It references the banana trade. And the banana trade kicked off on the Rio Grande, heading down, and not a lot of people know this.
Boundbrook Wharf.
Exactly. Boundbrook Wharf, people haven't really acknowledged Port Antonio as the birth of tourism, not just in Jamaica, but the whole of the Caribbean. In 1905, my uncle, Lorenzo Baker, just kidding, but his name was Lorenzo Baker, which is kind of funny. He was the first person to bring in the banana boats. They had first-class cabins in there, and there was a 400-room hotel called the Titchfield in Port Antonio in 1905. And if you go online, you can see these incredible pictures of these little steam tenders going to the yachts. And so a lot of the rich and famous started coming here then to actually enjoy the beauty of Port Antonio. So I always say that's its first exposure and renaissance. Then in the 40s, Errol Flynn came and set up shop. He, purchased a 2,000 acres of land, and his starlet young wife came, Patrice Wymore Flynn, who only recently passed away, and they set up a cattle farm there. So the fact that, so you had these pods of the Hollywood stars in Jamaica on the North Coast. You had Roundhill going, you had Noel Coward in Port Maria, you had Blanche Blackwell and Ian Fleming at Golden Eye, before it was Golden Eye as everyone knows it now. Then up in Port Antonio and in Long Bay in this stretch, you had Errol Flynn. So there is documentation of the Rat Pack partying at the Roof Club in the 50s when they came to see Errol. So, and these are all first-hand stories I got from Patrice, who used to hang out with all of them, So this ties into the Jolly Boys, in every shape.